want to start tonight with Vin Gomez, who joins me here at the desk, and Weijia Jiang at the White House on the North Lawn. Weijia, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Talk to us about what the administration said today about the case involving Kilmar Abergo Garcia.
So, Major, in this latest development, a federal judge was questioning the administration about why it is not facilitating the return of Abergo Garcia, as we have been talking about, even though that is what the Supreme Court ordered. And the Department of Homeland Security is basically saying we don't have jurisdiction over this individual because he is currently in El Salvador. And they wrote today in a response that if he were to come to a point of entry in the United States, then they would be able to facilitate his deportation to another country. Because, of course, what is at issue here is that the administration sent him to the one country that an immigration judge back in 2019 said he was not to go to for his own protection. And so now the Department of Homeland Security is saying if he can somehow make it from a mega prison, which he is being held in El Salvador, to a port of entry to the United States, we would be happy to facilitate his removal from the U.S. And of course, as you mentioned, Major, we did hear from the president of El Salvador here at the White House, who says, it's not my problem either. I don't have the authority to remove him right now from this prison, especially smuggle him is the word that he used back to the United States. So it continues to be a hot potato, Major, where neither government wants to take accountability for this person, this individual. And so we will now wait to see what the next move is.
And to your point, Weijia, there was almost a farcical statement from Homeland Security suggesting if he were to somehow make its way to a port of entry, he's not going to leave CCOT, the maximum security prison in El Salvador, on his own. That's simply not going to happen. I want to play for our audience sound from Kilmar Abergo Garcia's wife, Jennifer, who spoke today about these legal developments.
And I find myself pleading with the Trump administration and the Bukele administration to stop playing political games with the life of Kilmar. Our family is torn apart during this scary time, and our children miss their dad so much.
Weijia, I also want to talk to you about something that came up at the White House briefing today because President Trump made mention of it yesterday. The idea of homegrown criminals in this country, meaning American citizens, possibly being sent to El Salvadoran prisons.
That's right. He repeated that idea, Major, during an interview when she says we are looking into it. He said he loved the idea of sending the worst criminals, who are American citizens, by the way, to another country so that they are no longer this country's problem. And he directed publicly the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, to start looking into the legality of that. Well, last night, Bondi did an interview herself, and she was asked about whether this is something the U.S. can even do. And, Major, she said these people need to be locked up as long as they can, as long as the law allows. We are not going to let them go anywhere. And if we have to build more prisons in our country, we will. So I asked the White House, because that seems to contradict the idea that you're going to look into other options if she's saying they're not going anywhere. And they sent a statement saying that Bondi and the president are united in their efforts, without clarifying why there was no unity in what she said compared to what the president and the White House press secretary reiterated today, which is that it's something that they are looking into. On top of that, the border czar, Tom Homan, who we heard from at the top of the show here, also weighed in, and he said he wasn't briefed on it at all. He's unfamiliar with this idea. He hasn't talked to President Trump about it, and so he was not going to weigh in on whether it's a legal possibility.
It would be a very, very hard way to look at that as any kind of permissible legal possibility. Maybe in this administration, the trialist of trial balloons. Hold on there, Weijia. I want to talk to Finn about a couple of things. This relationship between President Trump and the El Salvadoran President Bukele is interesting. You have some insight into that. Please share it.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, this is something, Weijia mentioned something about accountability between no one was taking accountability. I would argue that it's more than just that. There is a strategy and a sort of a wink and nod strategy, if you will, where they know exactly what they are doing. At least it seems that from the sources that
There
I've
are
spoken to.
obligations to report things in court, but they're both playing hide the ball.
Right, exactly. It's a little bit like a soccer game in that respect, and I do think that what you're seeing right now is also is built upon a relationship that the Trump administration has with the Bukele administration, and it's a bit of an admiration as well for some of the policies that they have implemented. Bukele and Trump have some parallels and similarities, both in their stories and the way they govern. Right, they're both outsiders. They're both populists. They came from very similar sort of backgrounds. They came up and were disruptors in their own respective countries and populaces.
Political atmospheres.
Political atmospheres, absolutely. And, they both use social media to sort of like amplify their voices. They both avoided debates when it came to it. All these things that you see. But also there's an aberration.
Trump likes him, too.
It likes him because, especially on one particular aspect, and that's how he cleaned up El Salvador. He did. And, his detractors say it was at the, at the,
expense of civil rights.
At the expense of civil rights and
due process.
Absolutely, due process. But he detained 75,000 people in jails. In some of those.
Crime is way down.
Crime is way down. The gang violence is down. It's safe. I've been talking to some Salvadoran American community leaders here today who say, look, yes, these criticisms may be valid, but it is safe to return to El Salvador. Something that he's very, very popular.
And this alignment is part of this story.
It is, and also even if you look at the economic proposals that he has, he was the first country. He made El Salvador the first country to become to make Bitcoin legal tender.
Part of its currency.
Part of its currency,
along with the dollar.
Right. That's exactly right. So they
also favorably caught the attention of the President Trump.
And his allies, and you've seen Dom Jr. go down there and visit the President. You've seen Tucker Carlson go down there and visit the President. So there's some alliances there as well, outside of just the White House.
Very quickly, Finn, we're going to get to this later in the program, talking about the effects on American farmers of what is now declared by the President on social media, a trade war with China. Any conversations going on?
Well, I had a conversation with the Deputy Treasury Secretary today, Michael Falklander, at an event earlier today, where I asked him specifically. He had mentioned earlier that part of these this tariff war now, this trade war, was to get them to the table, was to get the Chinese to the table. I asked him specifically if it has materialized in any talks. They've talked about talks, and we heard Caroline Leavitt say today from the White House podium that it's up to China to make the first move. I asked him specifically. He had said that he did not know of any conversations between President Trump and President Xi. However, when I asked him specifically about lower-level talks, he said it was not appropriate yet for him to make any announcements. No clarity specifically on what that meant. However, we do know that the EU and the Chinese representatives of both governments met yesterday. One thing we're seeing as a side effect here is that our trade partners, the U.S. trade partners, are now starting to meet and potentially get closer to deals with China.
Make other considerations.
Continues. That's
right. And
Weijia,
I want to go back to you on the North Lawn of the White House very briefly, because this is a concern to major Fortune 500 companies, but it's even greater concern to medium and small manufacturers in this country.
That's right, Major. We're talking about thousands of small businesses and medium-sized businesses who just don't know what they're going to do to survive, right? Because they rely so much on Chinese imports, and they cannot afford to either import those goods in. We've talked to one business who says she'll probably have to just send the goods back to China because she can't pay the extra fee to get it across the line. And so they are talking to the White House. And interestingly, Kevin Hassett, who is one of the president's top trade advisors, said that we are fielding all these phone calls, that the Small Business Administration is talking to these businesses and trying to find a way for them, some options for them in the meantime as this trade war goes on. But the problem is there's no specificity. There's no details about what that means. And unless you're going to physically hand them relief, it's difficult for the small business owners to imagine what that is. Now, Hassett says that they are looking for ways that these companies can import stuff from other countries that do not have the same high tariff rate on them, the unbelievable 145% rate. But it's not that simple. We just spoke with a teddy bear manufacturer up in Vermont yesterday who said the problem is we can't get this fur, the goods that we use, from anywhere else for the same price, and we just can't afford it, Major. So it's a big ongoing issue.
Great insight as always. Weijia Jiang from the North Lawn of the White House. Fin Gomez right here with me at the table. Thanks so very much.